There's a moment that happens for a lot of people around this time of year. It's quiet, almost sneaky. You start thinking about who you were 12 months ago, what you thought would change, what actually did, what didn't. And somewhere in that reflection, a subtle pressure creeps in. The pressure to reset, to reinvent, to declare something bold and promise yourself that this time will be different. But I want to ask you something before we go any further. What if you don't need a fresh start? What if the most powerful thing you could do right now is carry forward what's already working? What if growth isn't about wiping the slate clean, but about trusting the momentum you've already built? Because starting over can feel hopeful, but continuity is where real power lives. Welcome back to the Motivated Savages podcast, where we live bold, lead fearless, and ignite our path forward. I'm Jody Savage, and today we're not talking about resolutions or rigid goals or reinventing yourself because a calendar flipped. We're talking about something far more meaningful. We're talking about continuity. The quiet strength of carrying momentum forward. The kind of growth that doesn't require you to erase who you've been in order to step into what's next. This episode is an invitation to pause long enough to notice what's already alive inside you, to honor the progress you rarely celebrate, and to move forward without pressure. Because the most lasting change doesn't come from dramatic declarations. It comes from steady awareness. We're taught, almost subconsciously, that change has to look dramatic. New year, new goals, new habits, new identity. As if growth only counts if it starts loudly. But most real change doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly. It happens when you stop tolerating what drains you. When you speak more honestly, even if it's uncomfortable. When you choose peace over chaos. Or you start listening to yourself instead of negotiating with everyone else's expectations. None of that fits neatly into a resolution. Yet those shifts are the ones that actually reshape a life. The idea that you need to start over implies that something is wrong with where you are. And that's rarely true. More often, you're standing on top of growth you haven't fully recognized yet. Personally, I've never been much of a resolution person. Not because I don't believe in intention, but because most resolutions always felt disconnected from real life. They were too rigid or too performative, too detached from who I actually was on a random Tuesday afternoon. They sounded good when I said them out loud, but they didn't always survive contact with reality. One year, I decided I was going to teach myself how to wink. And not a metaphorical wink, an actual wink. I spent an embarrassing amount of time standing in front of the mirror, closing one eye and then the other, trying to make it look effortless and charming. What I achieved instead was something closer to a facial twitch. I can technically wink now, but it's not the kind you see in the movies. It's more of a something's wrong with her eye situation. And honestly, that's as far as that resolution went. Another year, I decided I was going to become a morning person. Early alarms and big intentions. a vision of myself drinking coffee peacefully at sunrise. What actually happened that year was me hitting snooze with commitment and resentment, and then wondering why I felt like a failure at 9 a.m. Those resolutions didn't fail because I lacked discipline. They failed because they weren't rooted in anything real. And that's the thing most people miss. Most resolutions are surface level fixes for deeper patterns. We try to change behaviors without understanding what's underneath them. We aim for outcomes without addressing our identity. We chase habits without asking why we want them in the first place. And when the initial motivation fades, the behavior fades with it. Not because we're incapable, but because we were trying to graft change into a life that hadn't actually shifted yet. That's why resolutions feel exhausting to so many people. They ask you to perform transformation instead of letting growth emerge naturally from who you're becoming. And that's where continuity quietly wins every time. What's worked for me over the years is something much simpler. I pay attention to momentum. I notice what feels aligned, what feels sustainable, what feels like me. And instead of declaring something new, I decide what I'm going to keep carrying forward. Momentum doesn't always feel exciting. Sometimes it's subtle. It looks like fewer emotional reactions, stronger boundaries, more intentional conversations, less explaining. It looks like trusting your own pace, letting go of urgency, choosing consistency over intensity. This kind of momentum doesn't burn bright and fast. It compounds. And the mistake most people make is assuming that if growth doesn't feel dramatic, it must not be working. But quiet progress is often the most stable kind. Now let's look back together. What did you carry into this past year? Before you think about what you want next, I want you to reflect on what you already built. Not what you posted, not what others noticed, what you know changed. Maybe you handled conflict differently, or you stopped chasing validation, or you learned to pause instead of react. You may have trusted your instincts more often. Maybe you stayed when it would have been easier to quit. Those shifts matter. They're not small. They're the foundation. And foundations don't need applause to do their job. Now let's talk about affirmations for a moment. A lot of people struggle with them because they feel disconnected from reality. Saying something you don't believe can feel hollow. But affirmations aren't about pretending. They're about directing attention. The most effective affirmations are grounded in truth and pointed slightly forward. Instead of declaring something extreme, you anchor into what's already happening. Here's some examples. I trust the pace of my growth. I build momentum through consistency. I don't abandon myself to meet expectations. I carry what works and release what doesn't. I move forward without erasing my past. These aren't fantasies, they're confirmations. They reinforce continuity. There's a strange belief that growth requires destruction. That to become someone new, you have to reject who you've been. But that's rarely healthy. You don't need to burn down your life to build something better. You need discernment. You need honesty. And you need patience. You need the ability to say, this part stays. This part evolves. This one no longer fits. That's not starting over. That's refining. If you're someone who likes clarity, here's a simple practice. Instead of setting multiple goals or resolutions, choose one thing to carry forward intentionally. One habit, one mindset, one boundary or practice. Not because it's trendy, but because it worked. Growth doesn't multiply through overwhelm. It multiplies through repetition. Now ask yourself, what, if continued, would change everything? That's where your energy belongs. And this is where I want you to pause. Where did you show up differently this year? Where did you choose yourself without making it dramatic? Where did you stay steady instead of reactive? Those moments are proof, and proof builds confidence. Not the loud kind, the grounded kind. And here's the shift I want you to carry with you. The future doesn't require you to reinvent yourself. It requires you to stay present, to listen, to notice, to respond instead of react. Momentum doesn't come from forcing direction. It comes from alignment. And alignment doesn't rush. Now, this week's challenge is simple, but meaningful. Instead of setting a resolution, choose one truth you're carrying forward. Write it down. Something like, I trust myself more than I did before. I protect my energy. I move with intention. I don't rush my growth. Then, for the next 7 days, make decisions that honor that truth. Small ones count. Consistency is the goal, not perfection. I'm Jody Savage, and this is the Motivated Savages podcast. Live bold, ignite your path. That's the Savage way. If this message resonated, share it with someone who needs permission to honor their own path. And if you want to carry this message with you, check out our merch line at motivatedsavages.com. We have designed gear to remind you to live bold every day. Together, we're building the Savage community, a movement of people choosing purpose, growth, and bold living.